Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here today with one heck of a video here. I got my quick review here for Made in Abyss Season 2, Episode 11, the penultimate episode of Season 2. Now, I'm going to go things I liked about this episode, some of the things I didn't like about this episode, and then tie it up with a big old bow at the end. So, in terms of things I did like, there is a lot to cover. Now, first thing, I'm going to focus on kind of just the whole general main plotline of Faputa. If you recall from the end of the previous episode, Reg was this close to making her break, but she was able to fight through it and knock him out. So in this episode, we kind of see her slowly lose her nerve and lose her ability or willingness to just absolutely do what she needed to do inside her mother. And you saw it first from Haku stopping her from attacking Rico, saying, if you attack Rico, Rig will never love you in the way you want him to. That frustrating her, but at the same time, slowly getting her to snap, to break. And then ultimately, it was Beloff in the end who sacrificed himself to give her the last piece of memories that her mother had, that she trusted to him. That basically pointed out that although she, of course, was living in misery and pain, there were still good moments down with the people that she was with, particularly her moments with Vuko and Belov. Although I kind of have a little thing to pick about with her and Belov. I'll go to when I cover the things I didn't like necessarily about this episode. And also, you had Nanachi make his appearance. First time he's frankly done anything in this plot in 6 episodes because of him being quote unquote not amongst the living anymore. But he wasn't the whole time. And ultimately, one of the things I like about this episode, it really was just ultimately this Faputa having this break, and then you have the defenses of Ilbu go down, and then you had everyone to fend for themselves among the other creatures of the Sixth Layer that came into the village and absolutely annihilated a lot of the very few at this point remaining villagers, including them outright onslaughting Faputa, but since Faputa cannot die, she's just kind of in absolute misery. And then another thing I noted, and one thing it kind of came to me, is if you recall, throughout this whole season, the villagers were like eagerly anticipating Faputa, even though Faputa the whole time has openly stated that she wants to unperson all the people inside the village. And it made me think, this is kind of weird, right? Like very cult-like. It made me think of two things, two different religious systems. One, the Aztec religious system, and what made me think of that was when Faputa was like, an absolute pain in the corner. Some of the remaining villagers took her up and then literally cut off their own limbs and fed themselves to her. Even to the point where when she gained enough strength, she just grabbed a couple and ate them herself to garner the strength to take on the creatures of the Sixth Layer that had entered Ilbu. And it reminds me a lot of the Aztec mythology. If you know Aztecs, maybe the one thing you know about them was their practice of human sacrifice. They would actually kidnap other people from neighboring tribes and sacrifice them to their gods, particularly Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl is ultimately the main Aztec god. They had multiple gods, and he was supposed to, in many ways, be the harbinger of the end. According to their lore, when Quetzalcoatl came back, that means he was going to wipe everything clean and destroy everything. And if you actually follow history, some Aztecs believe Hernan Cortez, the conquistador that came over there and wiped them out, was Quetzalcoatl's true form. Because it would make sense that he comes with a spear and attacks and kills them. So I feel like, to a degree, they might have seen Faputa in a similar light. And also another one, something you're probably much more familiar with, Christianity. Because you might have heard of the phrase, oh, the second coming of Christ. The second coming of Christ, people in Christianity associate as this great, grandiose event. However, what some people neglect to mention or don't realize is that it effectively signals the end of the world, or the end of the world as we know it. I could go deep into the book of Revelation and all that stuff about that. Ultimately, when Christ comes, it's this great thing because, the Lord and Savior is back to earth, but at the same time, it means chaos and destruction are abounding. People are getting just slaughtered left and right. And in a way, Faputa kind of seems like that to them, where Iramui is effectively their god for giving them the sanctuary to live, sanctuary and this ability to live this comfortable life, Faputa, in a weird way, signifies the end of that. But in a weird way, signifies some promise, albeit a somewhat twisted promise, from Iramui that, oh, everything's gonna end because I want you to no longer be inside of me. And it kind of reminds me of that too. And I think that's what really kind of builds this weird parasocial relationship between Faputa and these villagers. The fact that these villagers, despite seeing them just slaughtering their own left and right, decides to offer themselves to her to basically defend themselves from the outside monsters. Or if you're in Christianity, the outside monsters might as well be the forces of hell, the forces of Satan, the forces of the Antichrist. And I think there's a bit of a parallel there. And that's something I thought was interesting. Maybe I'm reading a little bit too into it. But outside of that makes the most sense to the villagers' reactions to Faputa as a character. And another thing I thought was interesting, and this is a little bit of a tidbit. Right now, we've created this semi-broken system where all Rico need to do is blow her whistle, and Reg gets like supercharged into superpower mode, right? Well, superpower mode. What we also now have this little added limit to it where, well, it's based on Prushka's own energy, and Prushka right now is also drained, so she can't just simply wake up Reg with the missile and he can go into supercharged mode again. Because I think that's a good way to write how what ultimately was an OP power system in Reg, kind of out of it in a way. And some people might say, well, it's plot convenience, but whatever. And now I'm going to kind of go into something I didn't necessarily like about this episode. And that was, okay, if you remember back in the episodes with the Ganja Suicide Corps, did they ever establish Belov that much in terms of his relationship with Hiramui? Like, okay, we've been established that Belov is maybe the one other villager that sees Vuko as someone who's not the girl with the compass, but as like an own person for like beliefs and feelings and stuff. Like back in that first episode in the boat, he acted as if she was a person in the way that someone like Wazukayan acted like, oh, you're the girl with the compass. You're our MacGuffin in a way. Like he saw her as an object while Belov saw her as a person. But we don't see Belov interact much with Iramui, at least to the point where Iramui would see Belov as almost this pseudo father figure and in a flashback straight up say, I think of you the same way I think of Vuko. I thought that was really weird. And at the same time, I don't really know, man. It just seemed like they're kind of forcing this whole Belov connection. Like, make it so though Belov is the one that gives you these memories, or Belov would be the one that Iramui would charge with these memories. And you could just make the argument that's like, well, because Belov is the one person outside of Vuko that was repentant about using Iramui in the way that the villagers did. But at the same time, like, I can't recall a single time when we did the flashbacks where, like, Vuko is, like, with Iramui that Belov plays much a role in that relationship. And that's a small one, because we basically, Belov follows this arc of guy we thought was an evil, dark guy actually is a good guy the whole time, or he is kind of dark, but he admits it and he's trying to work for good. A character I feel like if they fleshed out more than the little bits and pieces we saw of him on screen, he could have been a really, really amazing character. And this is coming from the first episode when I said I absolutely hated him. But I have a tendency to change my opinion on characters, you know? And he is one of them. But after that, this was a solid episode. We have some good questions we might get solved in the finale. And talking about the finale, now I'm going to go on a little rant about Tanami. So Tanami, for the first time in 9 episodes, released a promo for the next episode. Doing so because it is the Season 2 finale of Made in Abyss, a 1-hour event at 12:30 next week. However, and I'm not going to say specifics in case you didn't watch that promo, they spoiled 2 very major events that happened in the finale. One, if you watched it, you definitely saw it because it is front and center, and they linger on that for a few seconds for some reason. And the second one, they kind of flash a little faster. But if you're watching with watchful eyes like I did, you basically saw how they were. Basically, that was how they were going to end this arc, the actual ending of the arc. And I know Tanami's kind of admitted in the past they don't really care how they do this. They kind of admittedly haphazard how they do this. But at the same time, you should be aware of what the big plot points of these episodes are so you avoid spoiling them. And I looked at like people reacting to this online. Almost every comment about this last episode had almost nothing to do with the episode itself. It had 100% to do with specifically one of the reveals, the one that was very front and center. Like, isn't this going to be a major plot point? It seems like a major plot point, and I asked my friend already, who, like I said, is like all the way up to date on the manga. She said, "Yeah, this is a major plot point. I'm surprised that they would directly show this." And I digress, you know. And again, remember, Toonami, way back when, early in the season, accidentally spoiled using their Toonami fan art project the fact that Belov was the Snake Boy like 5-6 episodes before we learned that fact in the anime. But again, and that's just another time where Toonami is just kind of sleeping at the wheel. But ultimately, this was a very solid episode. And despite the spoilers, I'm ecstatic to see how the last episode goes. And I've been spoiled by someone else on one other detail that almost would have to be revealed in this final episode. And of course, like this, I'm not going to spoil what it is, but when it happens on screen, some of you are going to have absolutely hilarious, priceless reactions, and I cannot wait to see them. I am Super Orange Cat, and that is all.